Hello, everybody. We're back for another review, and we're back to Marvel's What If, this time with episode 5, What If Zombies? So yeah, right off the bat, I have to say I was kind of surprised that they wound up actually going with the concept for this. It's one of those things that I would not have expected them to, go ahead and do, partly because of the Disney banner, partly because just the MCU has been trying to keep itself away from the particularly gory or dark stuff overall in the franchise, but this was kind of a pleasant surprise to have turn up in the What If series, but it is also the perfect place for it as kind of a spun-off. Well, what about this? If anyone's not familiar with the concept of Marvel Zombies, I think it was something that got started like in the mid-2000s. It was... I don't know how far in advance this stuff was planned out, but basically, in the Ultimate Marvel Comics, I think it was Reed Richards was dealing with essentially a different universe that was trying to break through to the Ultimate Universe, and that universe was full of zombies. And then it came back as its own actual series, like a mini-series later on. And it's kind of spun off into its own like sub-genre within not within the MCU, within Marvel Comics, because there was a series called Marvel Zombies, and that one had like a couple sequels, but then there were also other Marvel Zombies stories that were not sequels, they were like original ideas, and I think they've rebooted Marvel Zombies a couple times, and it's crossed over with The Evil Dead as well. It's a really bizarre, just kind of pileup of stuff. And the general conceit is some kind of zombie virus in the Marvel universe, in whatever universe it happens to be, and a bunch of the heroes are bitten, and the survivors have to figure out a way to either stop the virus, reverse the virus, or warn other universes about the impending doom of a zombie apocalypse. I know in one of them, Black Panther talks to a version of himself from another universe, and that winds up being their thing. Is like, Wakanda will not allow this to happen now that we have all this information that we wouldn't have had otherwise. So stuff like that. There are some good spooky shots in this episode. The very first shot we see that like really clearly shows the zombification is Tony Stark. So this whole thing takes place basically during the same 24-ish hours that Infinity War normally would. It begins with Bruce arriving on Earth as sort of as the unwilling or unwitting, either of those, herald of Thanos. But no one's around, New York is abandoned, and Tony Stark, Doctor Strange, and Wong wind up already being zombified and taking down Cull Obsidian, Ebony Maw. But we get this shot of Tony just kind of like into the screen, and it's a pretty spooky opening shot for that of like him, and then you also get Doctor Strange and Wong, and standing up behind Bruce Banner, you get a zombified Ebony Maw and Cull Obsidian, and it's a pretty like oh shit kind of moment there, and I thought that was pretty cool. I don't know if it's. I don't think it is, but it did remind me a lot of the first clear shot of a zombie that you get in Resident Evil, which I swear I saw something like do a reference to that recently as well. But that one's one where someone's turned away and then they turn and it's just like a completely just rotted out face. Though I will say the look of the zombies is about as far as they could have gone without having to worry about whether they were going to get rated out of Disney+. So all of the zombies in this episode have kind of... So their skin is kind of falling off, and like it looks more like extreme gangrene than anything. Like they kind of have this like bluish, rotted away skin, as opposed to in the comics, in the Marvel Zombies comics, it's basically like a lot of the time it's like full on. You can see their bones and their muscle tissue and just red, bloody, just mess all over them. Whatever's left. It's also not uncommon in the Marvel Zombies comics for like people to just kind of explode and stuff. Like I want to say at one point in the original Marvel Zombies run, the Hulk has been zombified. and he winds up eating. Oh man, let me see if I can remember this properly. Ant-Man, Hank Pym, Ant-Man becomes Giant Man and bites Janet Van Dyne's head off. And then the Hulk, starts eating Giant Man, and then shrinks down to Bruce Banner, and his insides burst open because he still has Giant Man in him. And so he spends the rest of his time just with an open rib cage because he exploded his insides. There's also one of the most memorable comic book panels I've ever seen, and it's really haunting, is at some point, this might have been the sequel. There was a Marvel Zombies 2 that I think followed up on this, and 2 was also not the second Marvel Zombies story. It's like the fifth, but so by the end of Marvel Zombies, a handful, like 7 or 8 heroes that have been zombified actually consume Galactus, and they don't even zombify him. They consume him, and they gain the power cosmic and become the zombie Galacti, I think. And they're basically traveling from world to world, consuming everything now. By the time of the sequel, they're trying to find other universes to consume because they've run out of food in the universe. And eventually they wind up in New York, where, and this is just some spun-off universe, whatever, it's not the main one, but where zombie Spider-Man winds up eating somebody, like some Spider-Man villain, Vulture or Mysterio or whatever. It doesn't really matter. Sandman sees this and thinks, holy shit, Spider-Man has completely lost his mind, and eventually encounters the Spider-Man of that universe, not realizing that they're different Spider-Men. He confronts him, and Spider-Man's like, I don't know what the fuck you're talking about. I don't know, man. This is weird. What's happening? You seem really spooked. And Sandman ultimately does this attack where he turns himself into sand and forces himself down Peter Parker's nose and mouth into his lungs and stomach, and then reconstitutes himself into a person to basically explode Peter Parker. So that universe's Peter Parker is extremely dead. And it was a really fucked up page, whatever. I've gone off on a very long tangent about the comic side of Marvel Zombies. The point being, none of this shit is going to fly on Disney+. So what we get is a much more PG-ish version of the Marvel Zombies. In addition, in the comics, they seem to generally retain all of their intelligence. All of their intellect is still there. They're fully communicative and everything. The difference being they are essentially being driven mad by a hunger. And it completely, it takes top priority and then some, in a way where, they are able to rationalize what they're doing. And in some cases, they're, in the comics, they feel, guilt and grief over what they're actively doing in the present tense, but they keep doing it because they're zombies, and they have to because they're being driven mad by the hunger. Here, much more traditional take on zombies, much more, groaning, shambling, corpse-like zombies, with the exception that the superhero ones still use their powers and still are, and it might be because it's a reflex in what's left of their minds, but zombie Iron Man is using his repulsor beams, and zombie Captain America is using his shield and throwing it and stuff, and so that's all still there, but they don't communicate amongst each other. They don't communicate with the non-zombified ones, so it's a different style of zombies than what the Marvel Zombies usually does. I don't know if that's true of any of the rebooted ones or any of the other spun-off ones. I only really know about that main initial burst of it, so that might have changed since then, and this might be more accurate than I'm giving them credit for. But yeah, they seem more dazed than ravenous, and we find out later that it's their limbic system is what's being affected by the quantum virus. And that's kind of how that goes. So it's, brain function that's being affected, which is pretty common for zombies anyway. And yeah, much less gory, much less visually messed up. I don't even know I'm not even sure if they ever. So in silhouette and in low light, you can see that some of them are missing, muscle mass. Like they're missing, like Captain America is missing a good chunk of his right arm. It's there as bone and like sinew and stuff, but like it's not very obvious that that's there because it's low light, and I don't know if they ever actually show up close, other than zombie heads, any like really noticeable missing body parts. I say that knowing that there are two very important cases of missing body parts that will be coming up shortly over the course of this. So it's a zombie story. We should talk about the scares. This one has a couple decent ones and a couple less decent ones. Very early on, after Bruce Banner has been rescued by the Cloak of Levitation and Hope Van Dyne and Spider-Man, he gets brought back to kind of a survivor zone. I don't know what to call it. Spider-Man has a bunch of subway cars all strapped together, hanging from buildings in the middle of the city so that the zombies can't get up there. And as they decide to follow a beacon that they get, they pack into the ant car, the shrinking van that they had in previous movies. And at one point, so we don't know that it's shrunken, but we see a giant zombie just right in front of the windshield, which is a pretty decent scare on that. And then I thought at first, like, oh, by this point we've already seen that Ant-Man has been bitten by Hank. And I assumed that it was Scott Lang in his giant man form, but it wasn't. It's just a regular zombie, and the van gets large and knocks it away or blows it up or something. There's a decent scare on that one. Then they kind of do sort of a double jump scare. So they've got this kind of spooky thing of Kurt talking about the Baba Yaga, which he did in I think it was the first Ant-Man movie, and then Spider-Man kind of does one of these to his shoulder. He's like, oh god, I thought you were. He's like, oh sorry, I guess I just jump scared you. I'm sorry, that was really rude of me. And then another hand does it to Peter, and that's in its Vision because it was his beacon that was being sent out. And that one, they're both just like and like. I thought that was a pretty decent little, like, it was a nice way to do a fake out and then a proper jump scare because you're not really expecting the second one. So that was pretty good. We have some really spooky. So Vision kind of mentions that, like, he's not on the menu since he is an android, which is a good point. He would be very much not susceptible to that. And something that occurred in the previous. So I'm wondering if some of these episodes are actually going to get strung together in the end, but regardless, Vision is not susceptible to the zombie virus, so he's been kind of working on figuring out a cure. While he's in the lab, the lighting is done in a very specific way where, so he's got kind of dark eyes in there, which is interesting because I think normally he's got very light eyes. I think doesn't he normally have like blue eyes in his Vision form when he's not in his like humanized Paul Bettany form? I don't really remember. But the light shines so intensely in a very small spot that as they pull out in one shot, it changes him from having very human eyes to his eyes kind of being dark except for that one dot, which is actually a very common. They do that with Thanos in the comics a lot. They have him have these just voids for eyes with just a bright glint on the inside of it. And I thought that was a pretty cool, like, it was a good way of showing that Vision's been up to no good during this zombie outbreak. He has, as it turns out, been feeding other heroes, at least bit by bit, to Wanda, who got zombified at an unknown point previous to this. I guess she got overrun in Scotland. I don't know. But she is a zombie. She is incredibly scary because now we have an insane Scarlet Witch doing all the things Scarlet Witch can, and she's immune to the cure. I thought this was a really clever bit of writing that Vision realized, so Vision having the Mind Stone being part of him and the zombies being affected by a mind corrupting virus, he uses his Mind Stone to be able to figure out how to at least repel the zombies and starts enhancing that and figuring out a way to cure, zombies, and eventually cures what's left of Scott, which is a head in a jar. We'll come back to that. But Wanda, because she was given her powers in the first place by the Mind Stone, or at least that's kind of up for debate based on WandaVision. But regardless, she certainly had most of her shit given to her by the Mind Stone, or at least most of it was brought out by the Mind Stone. So she's immune to its abilities. Or maybe she's just too strong. It's kind of a combo of the two. But I thought that was a really good bit of writing, and it's kind of like, oh shit, we have a cure, but it's not going to work on maybe the scariest character of them all in this whole situation. So we wind up with Scott in a jar. Scott in jar is incredibly insufferable in this episode because they kind of brush it aside at one point. He tells like two quick little zombie pun jokes back to back, and explains that like, oh, I deal with trauma by telling dad jokes. And like, you would expect that to be like the point where, okay, he's going to give us like one or two more, maybe three over the course of what's left of this episode. And it's going to be like little whatevers, but it's like every minute there's another joke, and it's like, okay, we need to stop now. It's really undercutting the tension of the situation, and it's not doing a great job of doing the like whiplash effect or anything. It's just kind of like taking you out of it so we can say a dumb thing and then coming back to it. We actually kind of have a bit of a pileup of jokey characters in this episode, because we have Scott, who's definitely the worst in my opinion in this one. We have Kurt, one of Scott's old crew, who is like, he's not exactly telling jokes. He's just being very goofy, and he's doing a lot of like reactive jokes. And it just kind of, it's almost always more than the joke needed. There's a point where, Okoye, suggests like, all right, we should split up. You guys will check the train. You guys will check the perimeter, or we'll check the perimeter. You guys, stay here. And Peter says like, oh, don't you guys have horror movies in Wakanda? That's a terrible idea. And she's like, oh, of course not. We have American reality shows, which is a good joke. And then Kurt's like, oh, boom goes the dynamite. That was a really good burn. Good joke. Have a fun time. And was like, stop. You're killing it. You're absolutely just steamrolling over this good joke by telling us, by the way, it's a good joke. Peter is I think done the best by far, because he's got some jokey, silly moments, but they are very in character and very like appropriate for the situations going on. He's not making jokes when Happy, who is also here and also making jokes, but it's at least a brief period of time. Happy gets killed or he gets zombified. Peter's not making jokes during that. I appreciate that. Scott is making jokes literally while Peter and T'Challa are talking about their dead teammates. And he's like, no, it's fine. You got me. And it's like, this is really not the time, man. Like, come on. So, yeah, there's a bit too much. Like, I don't know if they were trying to average out the horror and the humor, but the humor really stands out as being, like, overdone in this episode in particular, I think. Happy has his like little blam thing that he does. As he's shooting stuff, he's going blam, 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 which I'm trying to remember who it was. Someone on the set of the new trilogy of Star Wars movies was making lightsaber noises while swinging a lightsaber, and they had to tell them to like, hey, you need to stop doing that. And I want to say someone on Firefly did the same thing with the guns. They would say like pew pew basically, and they were like, you can't. We'll add that. Don't worry about it. But so it's played for jokes, and then he gets dragged away by zombie Hawkeye with a harpoon gun, and he's yelling blam as he's shooting into the darkness, and then he gets one more, and then the zombie Happy is also saying blam, and then Sharon Carter, when she uses the repulsor cannon to kill him with his own weapon, says blam, and it's like, it's done in a really like interesting sort of way. It starts as a silly joke, gets played for drama, gets a little bit overdone, but it's not too bad. I already talked about Scott in a jar, and he just kind of doesn't shut up, which kind of bummed me out. I think he would have been better used half as much. From the point that he shows up, half as much would have been the correct amount. And he's able to like move around because the cloak of levitation kind of grabs him and straps him in. So now he can at least not just be a jar on a table. And he gets grabbed as he's about to fall off of the chair at one point. So like the two of them are kind of a thing there. Speaking of the cloak of levitation, the shot of Peter in the cloak comes from this episode because the cloak is kind of helping him like slingshot the train because it won't start. And that's where you get kind of the shot of him walking under the train with the cloak. So I'm guessing we're not getting Sorcerer Spider-Man thing, but Hope Van Dyne is like, yeah, that looks really good on you. And there's like, it's not like intimate or flirty or whatever, but like the two of them kind of form this like thing. It doesn't last long because Hope gets, starts getting zombified, and that puts kind of a kibosh on all of that. But it was just kind of like this is odd, and I don't know how I feel about it. There aren't actually a ton of real action sequences in this episode. You'd think there would be a bunch, but there really kind of aren't. There's a lot of like tense moments, and there's a lot of zombies are attacking and we need to get away, but it's not really like full-on action sequences. Sam Wilson attacks them at Grand Central and eventually gets bisected by Okoye, and she's like, that was your friend, I'm sorry. And Bucky's like, I should be sad, but I'm not. All right, let's get out of here. And I thought that was kind of a cute little nod to their show where the two of them just did not get along basically at all. Even in the end, they really were like, they were still kind of getting over it a little bit. But it was also kind of interesting because, yeah, I guess this is after Civil War. So what happened to Sam Wilson after Civil War? Was he in? He was in Civil War. Him and Bucky were both in Civil War. Because, yeah, they start by fighting Spider-Man and get owned. But, like, I guess they went on the run together with Steve. Yeah, I think they did. I think they both did. So, yes, they would have had plenty of time to form that anti-rapport with each other. Steve winds up attacking when they're on the train and gets fucking bisected by his own shield. As soon as he threw the shield, I was like, they did this shot in the first Captain America on a train where I forget if it was Steve or Bucky. Someone throws the shield and it hits somebody and it gets wedged. Oh no, it gets wedged in a door to like hold it open so Steve can get to the front to capture Arnim Zola, I think. And I was sitting there just like, oh, please tell me they're going to do that again and they're going to cut Steve in half with it. And they fucking do. And it was awesome. Great shot. And Steve is down for the count at this point. The Hulk has a fight with Wanda at the very end of the episode. And the two of them actually seem fairly evenly matched, at least to start. We've seen that Wanda could probably have overpowered Thanos if it, even with the oh no, he didn't have the Infinity Stones, but probably could have overpowered Thanos in Endgame had he not had his air raid, go off, his airstrike rather on the battlefield. So Thanos having been able to pretty trivially take down the Hulk, you would think Wanda would have no real trouble with the Hulk, and that's probably ultimately what's going to happen. But at the very least, they were able to buy some time so that Peter and T'Challa and Scott and the Cloak of Levitation could get away. But it was a pretty neat thing there. Wanda goes to bite Bruce on the arm, and the Hulk kind of hulks the arm out to make it so that he's impervious to that, which was kind of nice. We got to play around with the Hulk, the whole no thing again at the start, so it was nice to see him come out for the last battle there. And so there's a point, so when Steve arrives on the train, he bites Sharon. Bucky just kind of grabs her by the head and just like throws her to the side. Like, Bucky is very pragmatic about like, once you're a zombie, it's like, nope, doesn't matter. No sentimentality left. Did the same thing with Sam. Did the same thing with Steve. It was like, nope, sorry. And Sharon then goes to try to bite Hope, but Hope like kind of shrinks down into her mouth and then grows and explodes out of her. And I remember watching them like, what are you doing? Is your mask airproof? Is your mask liquid proof? You need to like, and then she like flips off the helmet. I'm like, you're going to get shit in your mouth? Like, oh my God, this is the easiest way to get infected fucking ever. And then, someone points out like, uh-oh, and she's got like a cut right here. And it's like, well, yeah, you're definitely fucked now. That was such a stupid move. Why would you do that? But yeah, so she starts to go zombie. She winds up carrying them. We need to go into a section here called Hope is Very Stupid. So one, going inside of a zombie in the first place, way dangerous. You literally don't know what's going on in there. Blowing her up from the inside, also dangerous because anything could crush or cut you, and then it does. So she starts turning into a zombie. Then there's the plan of, okay, the train runs out of fuel before we get to Camp Lehigh, which is where Vision's beacon is being sent from. I'm going to carry you like this. And it's like, the moment she becomes a zombie, she just goes, bloop, and like, you're all dead. Like, what the fuck? What a terrible idea. Not this, not right on my helmet, nothing. Just like, all right, we're going to do this. I don't know why. Why not? Spider-Man webs everybody into a group, and she just goes like this, and then throws them, and Spider-Man can like web things up and catch them on the other side or something. Anything that would not have her physically carrying them like this to get there. It was kind of silly. And then, she winds up getting exhausted from being, giant wasp, and falls over and succumbs to the virus, and the zombies take her. And later on, giant zombie Hope is there to try to stop the Quinjet from getting away. Does grab it, but like the thrusters kind of make her. But then she like throws a zombie at the jet, and I was expecting it to be some zombie hero is now on the Quinjet, and they got to deal with that too. Like Spider-Man's going to do stuff outside, and Scott with the cloak is going to do stuff too. And it's like, no, just kind of like falls away, and that was it. And it was like, oh, okay, that wasn't that big of a deal, I guess, then. I will say that the line delivery is still a little bit weak. The Thanos is coming bit didn't sound very exasperated. It was just kind of like, Thanos is coming. I'm like, come on, man. The voice acting really bothers me in the show, just kind of as a standard complaint for this. I really hope they do a little bit more with the voice acting in, season 2. Peter does in fact look good in the Cloak of Levitation, and Bruce looks pretty good. He's wearing kind of a gi from like the Masters of the Mystic Arts, from the Sanctum Sanctorums. That was kind of a cool thing to do there. Sharon, at this point, I believe, is supposed to be working on her criminal empire, and she is here. So that was kind of interesting. Or maybe she still is, was it the dealer? The arms dealer? I'm trying to remember what her thing was there, but she's here. Vision goes and pulls the Mind Stone out of his own head, and it's the same like look and same everything from Infinity War, so it's fucking haunting, and it's worse to see him do it to himself, but that's to give the Mind Stone to the survivors so they can get away with it, and they can finish the cure basically. And they're like, yes, Wakanda's the answer. And then over in Wakanda, zombie Thanos with 5 Infinity Stones is like, oh god, that's pretty fucking bad. It'd be really interesting to see how that goes, because again, it's like no one is weaker for being a zombie. They're like at 90% of their normal shit, because they like the zombie Iron Man and Doctor Strange and Wong took down 2 of the Black Order without any real trouble, whereas in the movies it was like a whole sequence and they were kind of struggling. So that's a whole thing. What else? Bucky gets thrown incredibly far by Wanda, and a regular person, they're fucking dead as soon as they hit the ground. But we've seen, Cap at the very least fall from a plane and use the shield to brace himself on his fall. So I'm kind of wondering if Bucky actually survived, and now he's going full like survivalist out in the woods surrounded by zombies. I thought Bruce had a nice little moment where he gives the Mind Stone to Peter, and he's like, whoa, you can't go out there. He's like, I'm going to buy you time. He's like, we can't keep sacrificing ourselves. We have to figure out a plan. And he's like, all right, then avenge us. And it's like, oh, that's a nice little, because he's the last Avenger standing, or the last original Avenger standing. Earlier on, we see Iron Man, Cap, Black Widow, Hawkeye, and Black Panther get surrounded on the Golden Gate Bridge. Black Panther gets pulled out by Vision, who then starts cutting off limbs. He cuts off his right leg at the knee to feed to Wanda to keep her sated, and he can't bring himself to kill her, which is like, it's interesting because this takes place instead of Infinity War. In Infinity War, Vision is like, Wanda goes through the same thing and then ultimately is like, you're right, we just have to take the Mind Stone out of his head. I'm so sorry, we have to do this. In this one, Vision is in a similar boat of like, I can't do this. I can't kill her even like this. In the end, he does, do what he can to, slow her down, and then gives over the Mind Stone. But it's weird how both of these end with Vision dead without the Mind Stone in his head, and a very angry Wanda. But T'Challa has a really nice moment on the Quinjet where like Peter is like all freaked out, and he's like, well, what do you do? Everyone's dead. We're all that's left. As far as we know, we're the only ones left, and there's whatever Wakanda can do. And he says, in my culture, death is not the end. And he has more to his line, but it's just kind of like one, oof, very poignant right now, especially. I think the rest of it was something is like, so long as they live on in our memories and our hearts, they're not dead, kind of thing, which is like very on the nose, and like, an interesting line for him there. And now I'm sitting here going, okay, we had a T'Challa episode, but he's still showing up in some of these. Is this the last time we're going to be seeing T'Challa, or is it going to be something else later on, or something? And it's like, now I'm like bracing myself for whatever the actual last T'Challa moment winds up being. So yeah, I feel like this was a little more scattered in the end. I feel like I've been a motor mouth for this entire thing. It was a pretty good episode overall. There were things that they did that were definitely a little gun-shy compared to the comics, but I get it. I understand that they can't have Steve Rogers looking like an emaciated mass of meat with his skull covered in like rotted chunks of meat falling off. And like, I get that. I get that they're not going to do that for this. Not for the MCU, not under Disney, none of that. It was a comic that was geared towards an older audience than usual. That's not that uncommon for Marvel. Marvel Ruins is another one that is like even way more so morose and morbid and gross and sad. And I read it once, and I think I'm going to leave it at 1. Like, Marvel is not a stranger to doing more like mature material when they want to. There was no way they were going to do that here. So am I bummed? Yeah, a little bit, but I fully get it, and I can't hold it that much against them, I don't think. Also, something I have to commend here is the writing in this episode was minus the jokes, like pacing-wise and story-wise, this was a really good episode. Like, it felt like a complete thought. Like, it leaves you on a cliffhanger, obviously, but this is one where it's not like, okay, you remember how this and then this and then this and then this in the movies? Now there's this, and oh, don't worry about that, but then there's this. This one does a really good job, I think, of starting its story and bringing it to an episode conclusion, I suppose. I didn't feel like they were leaving a ton on the floor. I didn't feel like they were leaving a bunch of things hanging. We got a lot of kind of cameos, I guess you could say, from throughout the MCU, but not in like a really aggressive way, and not in a cheap way either. We'll be getting to a much cheaper version of that soon. Thanos being zombified makes me wonder what the status of space is right now between the Nova Corps, the Guardians of the Galaxy, the Asgardian, rescue ship. Not really sure what's happening there. Are Thor and Loki zombies at this point? Or rather, Loki is dead at this point, but is Thor a zombie? Is anyone that's out there a zombie? So there's a lot of questions going on there, but I like this episode a lot. It had some flaws. I think I know they used the humor to lighten the mood from what otherwise would have been a very dark episode, and even with their like glimmer of hope, this feels like a pretty hopeless ending. I think they could have done with a little less of the humor that they were trying to inject in, and I don't know what they would replace it with, honestly. Like, it did feel like a pretty complete episode overall. Yeah, no, I don't know. I don't think there was much else that like needed to be in there to make this work. The only thing that I would have seen them replace some of the humor with was a little bit more of kind of a showing of how things really like escalated, but by the same tokens, like, we don't need to know that. Like, they were like 24 hours later, the Pacific Northwest was completely overrun. It's like, that's fine, that works. That makes enough sense to me. So yeah, I would say I'm gonna give this episode an 8. I think it was really solid. I think it did a great job with the material that they had on hand. I think they did a good job with what they could accomplish in half an hour. that's the other thing, too. Some of these concepts have been a little bit too dense for half an hour, and some of them have felt like they're really trying to stretch things out for half an hour. This one really nails it, I think, and it was a solid episode. And I'm very curious what other people think. I've heard a lot more polarized thoughts on this episode since it came out, so I'd really like to hear what you guys think. And yeah. We'll have to see if they come back to this in any capacity. That'd be pretty interesting. And I guess we'll be back tomorrow for... Oh, which one is this? I keep forgetting the next one. Oh, maybe that's why I'm forgetting. So what if Killmonger rescued Tony Stark is our next one that we'll be talking about tomorrow before moving on to last week's episode and then this week's episode to get us all fully caught up. So... thank you guys for watching. Like I said, leave some comments down below. Throw a like or a subscribe on here. Why not? I don't know. Yeah, have a good one. Catch you guys later. Bye.